Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Higher Ed Live. We've been gone for a little while, but we're back and better than ever. Join us this season every Thursday for great guests and incredible conversations. My name is Alice Arredondo, and I am joining you today from Kansas City, Missouri, and this week I will be serving as your host. Higher Ed Live offers direct access to the best and brightest minds in higher education and allows audience members to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in our industry. All episodes are free and can be accessed at higheredlive.com or take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen. Higher Ed Live is produced by Platform Q Education, the leading developer of online engagement software and strategies. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter below and connect with us on social media using the hashtag HigherEdLive. For our podcast listeners, all of this information will be available in the episode notes. For our very first episode, we are discussing how the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted legacy strategies in admissions and recruitment and gave way to innovation. As campuses return to in-person options for prospective students, is a full return to legacy strategies the path to pursue? Legacy strategies may be easy and comfortable, but is that the legacy that you want to leave on your institution and the profession? I'm excited to introduce our three guests joining me today, three leaders who have successfully integrated legacy strategies with innovative initiatives. Dr. Matteo Rimsburg is Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management and Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Ohio University. Alora Thomas is Director of Admissions at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Dixie Williams is Vice President of Enrollment Management and Marketing at Columbia College. To start us off, I'd love for each of you to share a little more about yourself, how you got into the field of admissions, and really how you got to the positions that you're all in now.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Matteo Rimsburg, again with Ohio University, and I am actually in week 3 of my position, having just come from the University of Utah. And, as I think about, my introduction to the world of admissions and enrollment management, I think like most people, I kind of fell into it. I was the tour guide, the data entry, stuffing envelopes, those types of things, getting ready to graduate and not sure what I want to do. And my supervisor was like, have you ever thought of admissions? And that's when I realized that there were actually people that had careers in this field. And so, I have been very happy to be involved in admissions, recruitment, and enrollment now for 25 years at now my 4th institution, and learning lots and drinking from the fire hose right now here in Athens.
Hi everyone, Alora Thomas from UMKC. My higher ed journey is really similar to Matteo. I was a campus ambassador and a mascot in my undergraduate, helping with recruitment, and so definitely the passion was there. But realized, tried some other things after I did recruitment for professionally for healthcare, but realized I really liked the student aspect of it, but didn't realize I could get a job full time and enjoy it at the same time. I don't know what I thought everyone did at the university, but I didn't know it was a real job thing. So here I am 7 years in, and I started as a welcome center manager, doing campus visits and working with campus ambassadors, and now have the honor of serving as the director. So love higher ed, and being innovative and working with recruitment and enrollment management brings me joy. So.
Well, I think it sounds like a lot of us have the same story. We're not quite sure how we got here, but we were really involved in college, and that was definitely me. And I was getting a degree in communication with a PR emphasis, and just did not want to move to Kansas City to do that. So I went the route of getting my master's degree, started in housing, did some Greek life. That's super fun, fraternity and sorority life, but landed in admissions, actually doing transfer admissions. So that's actually been the bulk of my career, starting at Missouri State in Springfield, and then moved into an associate director role at Missouri Western, and then recently left my director of admissions position at University of Missouri St. Louis to take this new role of vice president enrollment management and marketing at Columbia College. So I have to say it's always a journey to get there. A little just about 18, 19 years of experience, and there's never been 2 days that are the same. I think everybody can agree. And ultimately, I'm just about student access in higher education and making sure those who want that pathway have that pathway.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, each of you, for joining the conversation today. I'd really want to kind of just jump right in. There was an article recently in the Chronicle of Higher Education that was titled, "Let's Not Return to Normal When the New Normal Finally Arrives." And although this article was focused a little bit on faculty and administrators, when you hear that statement, "Let's not return to normal when the new normal finally arrives," how do you think that applies to admissions and recruitment?
I can go first. For me, I would say it's more relevant than it could ever be. I think the platform Q and having exposure to webcasting and connecting with students outside of the traditional high school visits, the famous lunchroom visit, and being able to connect virtually is not something you can just say, okay, let's go back to just doing the lunchroom visit. It's forced that conversation and authenticity of being creative and innovative in ways to connect with students and meeting them where they are. Dixie and I have a similar, I'm sure everyone here has a similar passion about student access. And so if you go back to the old way, you're setting yourself up for failure, to be honest. I think returning to the old way is not going to benefit anyone. And it's about being creative and taking advantage of the new possibilities and ways to engage.
Yeah, I mean, how many of you probably do this a lot too? I mean, everybody's got one of these, right? And I scroll all day long, or I've got a 13-year-old, woohoo, exciting, and a 10-year-old, and YouTube is their favorite thing, I think, or TikTok or whatever it is that they're doing. And to think that we're just going to return to in-person when we're not out of the pandemic yet, but we're on the other side of what it is, I guess, is really just kind of backwards thinking. It's not what we should be considering for students. Even non-traditional students are checking videos and looking online. What I think the number one tool that we honestly all have is our website, right, for student recruitment. And so it's been coming for a while. I think what really happened with the pandemic is it forced people who thought, oh no, we'll continue to do everything the way we've always done it, to have to look at a new way of meeting the students where they are. And now as we sort of start to be on the other side, or knowing how to better manage during these times, we can't return to the way it was, because we are not the way we were. And students are not the way they were. Nobody is the same. And so you have to take advantage of technology, social media, videos, all of those things. And I think that's probably the biggest piece that's changed within the work we've been doing in admissions, is really focusing in where are the students. It used to be the high school lunchroom visit, right? That's why it started. That wasn't somebody's, oh, this sounds like fun, let's go sit in a high school lunch. They were there, they were allowed to speak to us, we could interact, and then get them to come visit campus. That's even been changing pre-pandemic to now. And so we really do have to look at, where are they? How do we reach them to help them be successful in the long run?
Yeah, and I think, Dixie hit the nail on the head. Like with the pandemic, there were, a handful of institutions that were already incorporating virtual. But I would venture to say the vast majority of us were really thrust into figuring out, okay, how do we incorporate this, and how do we use it, really as our primary way to connect with students and families. And there was at least I know for me and my team, there was a very steep learning curve, right? And as we are starting to come out of the pandemic, and I'm still looking ahead and saying, okay, we've got the Delta variant out there now, and what is that really going to mean for us? And we're starting to see campuses are saying, oh, they're going back to a mask mandate and things like that. And as I'm talking with my team about what are you hearing, from your schools, some schools are saying, yes, we're going to be in person, but some, schools and some organizations with college fairs, they're still trying to figure out what is it that we're really going to do. And so I don't think we're in a place where, anyone could go back to strictly the old ways in person, just because I don't know from a pandemic situation where we're going to be, even in a month, 2 months from now. But I think, where we are now is folks have had the time to learn and transition to how do we use these virtual tools that we now have access to and be more strategic. But the challenge is, I think, in being courageous in saying that we're not going to go back fully to the old ways of doing it. Because, there's this notion of optics of what you do. Like you can, we talk about those lunchroom visits and, if the only time you're able to go into a feeder school is during the lunchtime, and then all of a sudden you're choosing not to do that because there's no real ROI on it, but somebody hears you're not visiting like a feeder school, like there becomes that real, interesting conversation about, okay, we're just doing this for optics. There's really no ROI, but here's what we're doing instead, right? And I think that as enrollment leaders, we have to be able to have those conversations about, no, we're not doing some of these other things, but it's not that we're just not doing anything. It's we're actually shifting to strategies and tactics that make more sense, have a higher rate of return. But those are courageous conversations that you have to have. And I know for me, being in a brand new institution, like I'm still kind of feeling things out. And, we'll see where that comes from. But, so far, I think everyone that I've talked with here at Ohio, they're open to those conversations. They're looking for new ways to engage students because I do think there's a sense that not everything has worked out well in the past.
Go ahead, Dixie. No, go ahead.
Say that we also have an opportunity to turn that lunchroom visit into a relationship building time with the counselor possibly. So still being at the school, you might meet a few students, but you use that time differently to make sure that they understand you're there to support them. You still want the students to choose your institution, but this time looks different for us.
Yeah, so kind of along those lines, when you think about, the strategies that we have used before, lunchroom visits as an example, college fairs, some of the things that we've done in the past, what are the things that you think maybe we should get away from? Maybe we should move away from, maybe we should think about differently. And what are some of the things that you have seen work and be effective in place of those legacy strategies over the last 18 months or so?
Well, we've talked about the lunchroom visit. I don't think anyone in the profession is like just dying. Like, I think you can make a case that that is probably more of a PR and awareness activity than an actual recruitment activity, right? Sure. I like what Dixie talks about, and maybe using that time differently. The question that I continually ask is okay, what is the purpose of this activity? Is it to generate leads so that we can nurture those and try to, help guide students through that recruitment and enrollment life cycle? Is it to develop those relationships? And, both are important activities in what we do, but really thinking strategically about where is the best place to do that. We know, my experience has been you go to college fairs and that's a way to generate leads. And I'm sure we're all looking at the effectiveness of those leads. But this last year with virtual fairs, I know lead generation went down considerably. And you started seeing where, NACAC would just open up and provide the names of everyone that registered for the fair, whether they visited you or not. And again, is that going to generate a real strong lead? Or is it, can we leverage, Instagram and do takeovers and engage students, that way, where they're absorbing content, they're learning about us, they're getting excited about our institutions, and then there's some call to action, a way that they can actually take that next step and connect with us to become, now a hand raiser for us. And is that going to be a stronger connection than what we might find in a virtual fair? I think, some fairs worked well for us, others not so much. And, it's still going to be this year, I think is still going to be feeling some of that out.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's working well for us during the pandemic is, outside of the college fair and the lunchroom visit, is opportunity for one-on-ones and having a chat availability. So I know texting is huge, and when you implement that and being strategic of what phase do you start texting the student, because you don't want to do it too much where they're like, I'm out. But our counselors have been able to connect more authentically with them in one-on-ones. Some of the students don't want to talk in front of their parents, or on the tours, especially where the parents ask the question or they ask it for the student. They're connecting with our counselors and our ambassadors. So we have been able to get our ambassadors in front of the students a lot more than just the campus tour. And so I think, as Matteo said, in Dixie, the TikTok and the Instagram takeovers, those are your ways for students to see you authentically. And so that is replacing the lunchroom visit, and you're generating leads, because even though we're supposed to be distanced and masks are on, people are still on those phones. And if you start cracking up, you're going to look at, what are you looking at, and send it to me. And so that just opens the door and how you're getting out there, versus sitting someone in a college fair and having 5,000 printed materials and half of that on the floor as you walk out. So definitely being strategic that way.
I think we have to take a real look at lead source analysis and throughout the entire funnel. And so that's something that we're preparing to do here, is really deep dive into our lead sources and what that looks like. I think you have to probably, in order to get leads that will convert, it's less about going to the fair. That seems lower in the funnel to me now, because that's maybe in person. We're really going to have to look at the marketing that takes place, where it takes place, how it takes place, so that you have the leads to then access for the next movement for those students. Because I don't think we're going to have the same. I can tell you that my experience this past year at my previous institution was a real challenge in the freshman space, because we are not as well branded as other institutions. We don't have a football team that's winning, so they don't just know us by a sports event or things of that nature. And so, we had to get pretty creative to try to get in front of students when you couldn't go to a lunchroom visit or a college fair. And I love all of the creativity and innovation behind virtual fairs, but our most well-known institutions have succeeded through that. Some of us who are not as well-known were, I think, a lot more challenged in that space, because we all know that students who are waiting at the back of the line to see the institution next to you might notice you and come over. That's not how it works in virtual. You pick your room, you go in, you pick your next room, you go in. You don't just see, oh, I want to go check out that one. I like their table display. And so I think we have to be a lot more intentional in the marketing space, and getting outside of ourselves sometimes where we think we need to be, and really getting in where they are, and doing that level. And then tie that too, because I think the question was, what have you replaced or done differently? I don't think we're replacing, more as we're becoming hybrid, much like our classrooms are. As in, we just completed at UMSL last Friday, our first in-person event in almost 2 years on campus. We had almost 200 people on campus. We were maintaining our safety. But we, at the same time that we marketed for our in-person event, we marketed for a virtual event occurring actually yesterday, I believe. And we had 104 people register for in-person and 74 people register for virtual. And so you can tell that the people want it. And so you've got to be able to shift in those ways, and then look at those students and how they convert, and do they convert better from virtual. One of the things I really like about using Platform Q in order to offer that second virtual leg is we could also push that out again to all of the people who registered, not just the ones who did for the virtual. And so I think you really have to maybe not replace or get rid of, but genuinely, intentionally hybrid, make things compatible, what works with what and what doesn't work with what, and how do we readjust to get in those spaces. Because one of the big recruitment areas for us is transfer students. And if we're not on our campuses very much, they're probably not on their community college campuses very much. So we can't geofence such and such community college, right? So we have to figure out wider and bigger and deeper and all sorts of things. And in public institutions, at least, and probably in most, with less resources. So we have to utilize the technology because that resource becomes an issue.
Resources has really been a big part of the conversations that I've been having with institutions around the country as they think about, how they're heading into this fall, doing in-person things, returning to some of those strategies that they've done that they've had success with, but also trying to maintain some of the other strategies that they have found success with, other virtual strategies. And the question has been, admissions people always wear lots of hats and have more than one or two or three jobs. And so now, as we're trying to think about those things we do in person, those things we do virtually, what advice do you have or guidance that you might give as it relates to managing resources and making sure teams aren't burning out because they're trying to do it all? That's kind of the biggest conversation or concern that I've been hearing from a lot of institutions. Any thoughts on that?
I think you have to kind of reset and then set expectations with your recruitment teams and your operations teams and your support folks, because I think it has all changed. And so you have to really reset what your team looks like almost and say, okay, we're starting over, really. We were all in crisis mode during the pandemic, and I think we are to some degree still, and we're still trying to come out of that. But you'll notice that 3 of the 4 of us are in offices today, and so it's an indication that we're on the other side, I guess. But now that we sort of know how to manage, or we think we know how to manage, I'll never profess to know I know how to manage during a pandemic, but I will say I think I have an idea. We need to reset our teams to think that way. Most of our recruiters were at home for a good year or longer, and they spent more of their time yielding all year long than they did recruiting in many cases. And so I think resetting and setting expectations, helping them understand. I think that folks like me need to go do it too. Maybe I lead a virtual event or things of that nature so that I know what they're going through. Most of us can probably say we were recruiters or we did something in that space when we were younger. We've just progressed through our career. Well, we need to do that now again so we can keep saying, oh, I used to do that. I know what that means, to help with our recruitment staff and our admissions staff to kind of reset what we're doing moving forward.
Yeah, our team's having a retreat. And so for us, and they're going through training, most of my recruitment team, this is their first travel season. There's only a few veterans that have been through an actual travel season. So now that we've been approved for travel currently, Delta variant, insert, but flexibility. And as Dixie kind of just mentioned, it's understanding where they're coming from and seeing where they are. And so it definitely comes down to being strategic with their time. So yes, we're going to have in-person, and yes, we're going to have virtual. So how do they get all of that done in one day on top of travel? So taking that into context, but understanding there's a need for certain parts of it and when we implement it. And so they know, and for me, I just went to the same thing, Dixie. It's interesting. I just released our expectations in May for the entire office. So we have recruitment and processing and CRM teams. And so went through expectations of what they can expect from me and what we can expect for this upcoming year. To set the tone. And so during this retreat, and we're rediscovering each other and what it is like to be with everybody in the office, because there's some teams know that some of us have been there since day one. We went home for a couple months, but then been back in the office present the whole time. So making sure we understand the flexibility and supporting them with, again, their ideas and how we connect and provide student access to not just the students, but families, the parents and the supporters that want access to this information. What are we doing to change what that interaction looks like?
You know, I think Alora just made a really important comment about listening to our staff, right? You know, they're really on the front lines. I look at the team that I've just joined, and we've got 4 admissions advisor positions that are open right now we're interviewing for. So if you know anyone great, send them our way. You know, and we've got a team, those that, you know, are here with us, they've never traveled. You know, for the institution. So in a lot of ways, it's a new team. But I think, you know, setting those expectations, but then also providing a space for, you know, idea generation. You know, we expect our folks to be territory managers and to approach how they recruit in their areas and do things that work, and not that cookie cutter approach. And you know, and so being open to hearing ideas, you know, as I'm looking at past, you know, history of visit notes and things like that, it doesn't seem to make sense that maybe I go and visit every school in the district because we're really only seeing, you know, 1 or 2 students. But what if I were to do, you know, an evening event, you know, whether that's in person or virtual from a district perspective? Is that a better use of time? And, you know, rather than being in an area for, you know, a week, can we be there for 3 days and still achieve the same outcomes and potentially even have more? And I think this is the piece where virtual really comes in, is it does increase access for many more students who may not have the ability to drive across town or to get out of class for a visit, right? It creates a space where they can get information on demand, for example, so they don't actually have to be there. And then you combine that with the flexibility of being able to schedule a one-on-one follow-up conversation with your assigned advisor or counselor, you know, at a time that's convenient, in a way that's convenient for the student or the family. I think that's fantastic. And I think that's one of the, in my mind, kind of the super steps that we've been able to kind of take in the field, is that personalization. I still have concerns, though, about access, particularly for our students that you know, live in the more rural areas where broadband is not readily available. Like, I still think we have a population of students that we have to be mindful of, that, you know, the in-person may actually still be the best route to provide service to those students and families. And I worry that sometimes we lose that population in the conversation.
I mean, I think what's awesome about the virtual aspect is some of that data that's relative. I mean, instant. You don't have to wait to run a report. You don't have to wait for all of it to come in. You can see how many people are in the room, and you can see some of that information and the questions that they're asking and they're rising to the top. But that also helps when, as Matteo and Dixie mentioned, you know, you're supposed to go to every school in the district and go multiple times. I then can go back to my leadership and say, well, we know they're not showing up, but here's where they are. Here's my data that I have right now for you. And so in conversations like this morning, I'm able to say, this is where we're headed, and these are the reasons why. Here's the data to back it up, because we know data talks. So, yes.
Could each of you expand on that a little bit in terms of the challenging conversations? You know, Matteo, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but really having those conversations with decision makers on campus, or with those on your campuses who feel that things should be done a certain way, and you're seeing evidence to the contrary, or you're trying to present new ideas. How are you approaching those conversations that you're having?
You know, I think I'm just teeing up to start having those conversations at my current institution. You know, previously, it was, working to pull data as best as we could, and, so that we could demonstrate that we are getting engagement. Whenever we had an event, a virtual event, I would say, okay, here's the number of folks that actually participated during the time we were running the event. And then here's the number that participated in, after the event through the next 24 hours. And then what might that look like a week out, right? And I think that's the piece, is helping leadership connect the dots, that if we're doing an in-person event, I can tell you, here's how many people came. But once we leave that hotel ballroom, right, nobody else is getting that information. They have no access to what we've been sharing, the conversation, or those types of things. But with virtual, you have that after hours access, right? So now it's not just that we had, 150 students attend the event, but then in the next, week, we had an additional 75 that also engaged with the information. And, that's 75 more folks that would not have been able to engage with that information, had it been in person. But it's still, I get back to the optics, right? Like, if you're talking about, are you being seen out in the schools? I mean, we all know that there are times when folks are saying, well, Matteo, your team never goes to this school, when in fact we've been there like 7 times during the year. It just happens to be that their student doesn't engage with us when we show up, doesn't open their email. Like, we all know that those students and those stories exist, and I don't think we'll ever get away from that. But it's being able to say, no, we were there, but we're also providing these opportunities, right? And where a student can get the information on demand. So, it's that notion of we are trying to provide increased opportunities for students to get information, and it doesn't always have to be in person.
I think I'm much like Matteo, probably getting ready to have many of these conversations. But I think you can draw from your own data, but I think it's helpful for your administration or your leadership to also see what the state, national trends look like. And so, honestly, sharing articles that are coming, that are research-based, that show engagement virtually versus in person, or whatever the case may be, is helpful too, to set the stage that, we're not the only institution sitting out here with this challenge. This is, it's worldwide, really. And here's some of because I think that's just the way enrollment management works. I mean, we need to keep aware of the trends that are occurring nationally, globally, and then how does that connect directly to what we do, and then use our data very much to tell a story. And I think not be scared to tell the real story. Good or bad, I'm a very upfront, blunt, out there person who tells it like it is. I would say that's good. Others may disagree, but I think we have to tell the real story, or we will not get to. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but there are, the Cliff in 26, and now there's reading a new one, Demographics and Demand for Higher Education, that talks about 2032. So we're, keep moving further and further out, and, what are the birth rates now, and will that impact 18 years from now? We have to do a lot of drawing the lines because we're the experts. So the people that we're talking to about this, they're an expert in something else potentially, or they are our presidents, our chancellors, so they oversee everything. And so we have to really tell the story, draw the lines with data. Stories, though, are going to be really important to tell too, because I think that can help them then really see the impact of both in person virtual hybrid recruiting, the changing of the tools that we provide to our recruiters. A cell phone with data and texting ability is far more important tool now than a rolling bag filled with your other stuff, right? I mean, one is going to cost a lot more than the other. You can just readily buy it off of Amazon, but your return on investment is far greater because students, at least high school students, and to be honest, people my age, because I don't even want to do this, they want a text message. They don't necessarily want a phone call every day or whatever it is. So we have to really arm ourselves and our teams and our administration and leadership with today's information and how that will relate to the future of enrollment growth.
Yeah, I think Matteo and Dixie covered it very well. One thing I add is, again, networking with each other and enrollment across departments, across institutions, in your systems and outside, because again, we have some things in common, and we use that information because our chancellors, our provosts, they're talking as well. And so getting them all on the same page and providing that information as a united front will help with those conversations with the data. So.
And I think that's one of the opportunities that I saw this past year, particularly as we think about limited resources and how do we engage our campus partners. Looking to these virtual platforms allows us to engage our partners in ways that we couldn't when we were doing in person, because some departments or colleges don't have resources to be able to send folks on the road with our advisors and our counselors. But with virtual, we can provide a way for them to tell their stories to prospective students in ways that we weren't able to do in person. And I think that creates some new opportunities. But it can be a little scary to bring people into this world and think about it differently, right? So I think it's helping everyone across campus understand and see the potential opportunities that exist, and by thinking differently of how we approach the work that we do.
I with a somewhat personal question, but as leaders in enrollment management, I think it's helpful for others in the field to kind of hear from you and what your goals are. And so when you think about everything that you've experienced and learned over the past 18 months, when you think about moving forward and the decisions that you're trying to make, what impact do each of you hope that you have on your campuses and on the initiatives and things that you're choosing to do? What do you hope that your legacy would be as we kind of move into this next and really start to take advantage of the opportunities that we have and potentially build something new?
So I guess it depends on how much I'm going to be held to this if it doesn't turn out right.
That's right.
Managers I'm not going to answer that question out loud on a recording. But Alice, for me and my campus and being new to my campus, I think for me it's really helping create a strategic enrollment plan that does impact now and in the future, and that we can be flexible and nimble, because our students absolutely are. And sometimes, unfortunately, in higher ed, we're too slow to keep up. But I hope in my case that I'm able to really work with our entire institution, because Columbia College is unique in that we have a main campus, but we also have 36 other sites across the country and online, and have been doing that for a very long time and been doing that well. But we need a strategic plan to move forward from where we are now more than ever, probably. And lots of people talk about these strategic enrollment plans, but I don't know that we always write them, nor do we then implement them. And my goal, my legacy will be that we will write it and implement it, and that we will do well in that space. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will grow enrollment by 27% next fall, 22. But the goal would be that we have a course of action as an institution to move forward in enrollment, as we know that it's still going to be dicey for years to come. And it's not necessarily because of the pandemic. Lots of things have been playing into that for a very long time. And so now more than ever, we have to have a plan, and we have to be able to implement that plan.
For me, I would say definitely strategic, but also not afraid to be innovative and turn away from how things like our conversation have been in the past. And so for me, getting our campus to understand the importance of everyone being involved in recruitment, not just the Office of Admissions, but everyone realizing the customer service aspect of student access and meeting a student where they are. We are higher education. We are the experts. So therefore, we should be teaching and educating those through the process and doing it with grace. And so for me, I would say, I think, again, my team heard me just say it this week, authenticity, being true to who we are. I am very passionate and excited about education and love to have the conversation, but I'm willing to meet a student where they are. If I have to walk them across campus to get them connected, then that's what I will do. I'm not asking my team to do it, but I will do it myself if and when needed. And so changing that culture is something I hope to leave and share across campus in addition to my team. And I think that'll transcend to the students here in Kansas City and beyond. So I think strategic, innovative, authentic, and putting the student first is what I hope to leave. And hopefully that impacts enrollment.
In a positive way, right?
Right. Yes. I know this is being recorded, so I can't say I'm going to be 100% past goal, but I'm going to be as close as I can be. So, yes.
Yeah, and as I'm transitioning into my role, I've been thinking a lot about this question, and it's taking the great things that are already happening and finding ways to continue to support those and finding ways that we can enhance those things, but then looking at, where are those opportunities that we can, develop our staff more, develop our strategies more, think more strategically, and potentially involve more folks across campus in those conversations. I think about our frontline folks in all areas, whether that's our tour guides, whether that's our admissions advisors, our regional managers, but also like our back end folks in processing and systems, and helping everyone understand like the importance that they play in being able to not only bring in a new class, but how that new class actually impacts retention and graduation. And, having that conversation that, the outcomes that we hope to see in an institution starts with what we do on the front end. And how do we prepare our teams to really approach that work in a way that just, invigorates them, helps them be creative, helps them become more strategic in how they approach their work, and being willing to and being okay to fail every now and then because we're being innovative, and what can we learn from those failures and continue to grow and move on. So we are providing the utmost service to our students and families and our communities, but also making sure that we're doing what the institution needs us to do to remain viable.
Hey, Alice, I also want to have a lot of fun, and I want to bring days back in the office, if that can be on my legacy at some point. I've missed those a lot. Anybody else? Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, it's a fun profession. It should be fun, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, each one of you, for spending some time with me today. Thank you for sharing candidly, for providing some of your experience and your advice to our audience. I greatly appreciate it. And for those of you tuning in, thanks for tuning in for this first Higher Ed Live. As a reminder, you can join us every week on Thursdays for great guests and incredible conversations. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.